The fluorescent light in the hallway of the Maplewood family shelter didn't just shine, it hummed. It was a thin electric whine, a high-frequency needle scraping against the inside of my skull. It was 6:45 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Portland, Oregon, and the air in the common room smelled like industrial-strength lemon bleach, wet asphalt, and the heavy, damp wool of a dozen coats drying on plastic chairs. My daughter, Maya, was 6 years old, but she sat at the scarred laminate table with the stillness of someone much older. She was hunched over a sheet of gray construction paper, clutching a nub of a forest green crayon. She was drawing a house. It always started with the chimney, a sturdy rectangle with 3 loops of smoke curling into a sky she'd colored a stubborn, defiant blue. "Mommy, look," she whispered, sliding the paper toward me. "This one has a porch. For your coffee." I looked at the drawing, then at the lukewarm bowl of canned tomato soup sitting between us. My heart didn't just ache, it felt like it was being wrung out like a wet rag. "It's beautiful, baby. Maybe the next one can have a big tree for a swing?" "A willow tree," she decided, her dark curls bouncing as she turned back to her work. I went back to pretending to grade papers. I was a second-grade teacher at a Title I school 10 miles away. Every day, I stood in front of 30 kids and taught them about the magic of the alphabet and the importance of community, while my own life was packed into 2 Samsonite suitcases tucked under a metal bunk bed. My name is Savannah Miller. I'm 29, a mother, an educator, and currently a ghost in the system. For 2 months, I've lived in room 212 of the Maplewood shelter, believing I was a failure. Believing that my parents, the people who raised me in a 5-bedroom craftsman in the West Hills, were struggling too much to help me. I was wrong. I wasn't a failure. I was the mark in a long con, and the thieves were the people who gave me my last name. Started last January. The rain in Portland doesn't just fall, it hangs in the air like a gray curtain that never opens. I remember that Tuesday because it was library day at Maya's school. She'd come home to our cramped 1-bedroom on Division Street with her backpack bulging with picture books. While she spread her haul across the kitchen table, mostly books about animals building nests, I stood at the counter and felt the world go cold. The envelope was white, professional, and final. A 30-day notice to vacate. The building had been sold to a California-based developer. Luxury lofts were coming. The working-class single moms were going. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring. I folded the paper with trembling hands and slid it into my life folder, the clear plastic organizer where I kept Maya's birth certificate and our meager tax returns. "Which one first, Bug?" I asked, sitting next to her. She held up a book about a bear building a cabin in the woods. "The bear needs a roof, Mommy, so the rain stays out." "Smart bear," I whispered. That night, after Maya's breathing turned slow and rhythmic, I sat on the floor of the kitchen, the only place I could turn a light on without waking her, and did the math on the back of a grocery receipt. Security deposit, $1 $800 first month, $1 $250 last month, $1 $250 application fees, $100 total, $4,400. I had $1,100 in savings. My ex-husband, Marcus, was a freelance consultant, which was a fancy way of saying he lived in a van in Sedona and sent child support checks that bounced like Spalding basketballs. The last one had been a return to sender in October. I felt the panic rising, a hot, oily tide in my chest. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. "Savannah? It's nearly 10. Is everything okay?" Diane Miller's voice was crisp, like a freshly ironed sheet. "Mom, I got an eviction notice today. The building's sold. I have 30 days and I don't have the move-in costs for a new place. The market is insane." I took a jagged breath. "Can we stay with you? Just for a month? Just until I get my tax refund?" There was a silence on the other end. It was the Diane pause. She used it to build tension, to make sure you knew that whatever she said next was a massive favor or a heavy burden. "Oh, honey," she sighed. "You know we just don't have the room. Kyle and Brenna are staying with us right now. They're between transitions with the new real estate venture. My brother Kyle, 33, earning a full salary at a logistics firm with a wife who flipped houses for sport. They were staying in my parents' 4,000 square foot home while I was staring at a 30-day countdown to homelessness. Mom, it's a 4-bedroom house, I said, my voice cracking. Maya and I can sleep in the den. On the floor. I just need to keep her out of a shelter. A shelter? Don't be so dramatic, Savannah. You're a teacher. Figure it out. It wouldn't be fair to Kyle's kids to have the house so crowded. It's about boundaries, honey. We love you, but we can't keep rescuing you. Rescuing, I repeated. The word felt like ash in my mouth. She had never rescued me. Not once. Okay, Mom. I get it. I hung up before she could tell me to look on the bright side. 3 weeks later, Maya and I checked into the Maplewood Family Shelter on Powell Boulevard. The intake worker was a woman named Priya with warm brown eyes and a lanyard that looked like it had been through a war. She handed me a stack of laminated rules. No visitors after 7 p.m. No food in the rooms. Lights out at 10 p.m. It's temporary, Priya told me, her voice soft. I've been assigned to your case. We're going to get you on the list for Section 8, but the wait is long. In the meantime, we'll work on emergency housing. Maya gripped her stuffed bear, a one-eared creature named Captain, and looked up at the peeling paint of the hallway. The air smelled of industrial bleach and someone else's overcooked spaghetti. Is this a hotel, Mommy? It's a transition, baby, I said, trying to sound like the confident teacher I was during the day. Like a camping trip, but indoors. Our room was roughly the size of a walk-in closet. 2 metal bunks with vinyl-covered mattresses that squeaked whenever you breathed. Maya took the top because she said it was closer to the stars, even though the only thing above her was a stained acoustic ceiling tile. That first night, I lay on the bottom bunk, staring at the rusted springs above my head. The hallway light hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a woman was crying, a raw, jagged sound of pure distress behind a closed door. Mommy? The light is making a noise, Maya whispered. I know, Bug. Close your eyes. I'll tell you a story. I told her a story about a girl who lived in a forest and could talk to foxes. I made the foxes wise and kind. I made the forest a place where no one ever got an eviction notice. By the time I reached the end, Maya's breathing had gone slow and even. I didn't sleep. I lay there and thought the thing I could never say out loud. She's going to remember this. Not the story. This. The bunk, the buzzing light, the smell. That thought sat on my chest like a stone. The next morning, I went to work. I put on my best cardigan, did my makeup in a communal bathroom mirror while a woman in the next stall washed her hair in the sink, and drove to Maplewood Elementary. I spent 8 hours teaching 7-year-olds how to subtract double digits. I kept a stash of granola bars in my bottom drawer for the kids who came in without breakfast. Now, for the first time, I was one of those parents. That evening, I sent a photo to my mother. It was a picture of Maya at the shelter table, holding up a drawing of a rainbow. I didn't say where we were. I just wanted her to see what she'd turned away. Diane replied 3 hours later at 9:47 p.m. Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times. We're at the club for dinner. Talk soon. I stared at the screen. I took a screenshot. I created a new folder on my phone. I labeled it Records. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I needed to keep it. Life in the shelter became a blur of almosts. I found a studio on Stark Street, 600 square feet, 1 block from a bus line. The landlord said he'd hold it for 72 hours if I could put down $2,000. Called Kyle. Kyle, I need a loan. $2,000. I'll pay you back for my tax refund in March. That's 6 weeks. I just need to get Maya out of here. Sorry, sis, he said, and I could hear the sound of a TV in the background, some sports game loud and cheering. We're really tight right now. Brenna just put a deposit down on some custom work for the house. Mom said you should just apply for Section 8. That's what it's there for, right? I hung up and opened Instagram. There was Kyle's latest post, a photo of a brand new silver Chevy Tahoe. Hashtag upgraded, hashtag blessed, hashtag grateful. I screenshotted it, added it to the records. A week later, my mother showed up at the shelter. She didn't come to help, she came to perform. She brought a plastic trash bag filled with Kyle's kids' hand-me-downs, stained t-shirts and jeans with frayed knees. She walked into the common room wearing a designer scarf, looking like a tourist in a disaster zone. She signed the visitor log with a flourish of her looping cursive. Diane Miller. Purpose, family visit. Oh, my poor babies, she cooed, hugging Maya for the benefit of the intake worker watching from the desk. Grandma's here. When the worker turned away, Diane's smile thinned. She sat across from me and lowered her voice to that register she used when she wanted me to know she was serious. Savannah, we need to talk. This situation, the instability. It's not healthy. I might need to talk to the court about Maya's living arrangement. My blood went cold. She was talking about the supplemental guardianship. When Marcus and I divorced, the court had appointed Diane as a temporary supplemental guardian. A formality, they said. Are you threatening me, Mom? I'm just worried. As her legal guardian. Supplemental guardian, I corrected. Same thing, she snapped. She stood up, kissed Maya on the forehead, and said loud enough for the hallway, Be good for Mommy, okay? Grandma loves you so much. She signed the visitor log on her way out. Date, February 3rd, time, 4:20 p.m. That night, I started a handwritten journal. I wrote down the date, the time, and exactly what she said. I didn't have a name for what she was doing yet, but I knew I needed to document it. I called her one last time when the Stark Street apartment fell through. Mom, I'm asking for a loan, not a gift. The answer is no, Savannah. And frankly, maybe this is God's way of telling you to be more responsible. I counted to 5. Okay, Mom. I let the apartment go. That night, Maya tugged my sleeve. Mom, when are we going home? Soon, baby. The word soon had gone soft and shapeless, like something left in the rain too long. The turning point happened on a Saturday in late February. The shelter was loud on Saturdays. Too many people in too small a space. Common room smelled like canned tomato soup and wet wool. Maya was drawing. I was pretending to grade papers while actually staring at my bank balance, $100, when I heard a car door close in the parking lot. Through the window, I saw a black Lincoln Town car. It was a land yacht in pristine condition. Not the kind of car that usually pulled into the Maplewood lot. An elderly woman stepped out. She wore a camel-colored cashmere coat and moved with the deliberate purpose of someone who had decided something. She reached the front entrance and looked through the glass. Her eyes swept the room, past the bulletin board for food pantries, past the row of high chairs, and landed on me. She stopped. I stopped. It was my grandmother, Evelyn Hargrove. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years. My mother had told me Grandma Evelyn had faded, that she'd moved to a high-end assisted living facility in California and didn't want visitors because she was confused. Evelyn pushed through the doors. She walked straight to our table. Her eyes moved from my tired face to Maya's drawing, then to our open room door where the metal bunks were visible. Savannah, she said, her voice cracking on the second syllable. Grandma? What are you doing here? I thought you were in California. Evelyn sat down heavily on the plastic chair. She took my hands in hers. Her skin was like parchment, but her grip was like a vice. Why aren't you living in your house on Birchwood Lane? The room tilted. I felt the fluorescent light buzzing above us like it had crawled inside my skull. What house, Grandma? We lived on Division until the eviction. We've been here for months. Evelyn reached into her leather handbag and pulled out her phone. She opened a PDF and turned the screen toward me. It was a trust deed. Grantor, Evelyn Hargrove. Beneficiary, Savannah Ilera Miller. Property, 1422 Birchwood Lane, Portland, Oregon. I set up an irrevocable trust 2 years ago, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet register. I bought that house for you and Maya. Free and clear. No mortgage. I gave the documents to Diane to finalize because she was my daughter and I trusted her. She told me you moved in last April. I couldn't breathe. I've never even heard of Birchwood Lane. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She sent me photographs of the kitchen, Savannah. She told me you'd hung new curtains. She told me Maya loved the backyard and the old oak tree. She told me you were so happy you didn't want to be disturbed by family visits while you settled in. She told me you were in California, I whispered. She said you had dementia. Evelyn almost smiled, but it was the kind of smile that had glass in it. I'm 78 years old, Savannah. I live 12 miles from here in Lake Oswego. And I have been sending birthday cards to this shelter zip code for 2 years because your mother told me you were renting it out while you traveled, but the forwarding address was a P.O. box she managed. She pulled up a text on her phone. Diane, August 12th, Savannah loves the house, Mom. Maya's room is painted yellow, her favorite color. Then a photograph, a sunny kitchen with blue curtains and a fruit bowl on the counter. Do you recognize this kitchen? I looked at it. I'd later learn when we ran a reverse image search that it was a stock photo from a homestaging website. My mother had built a fake life for me, complete with curtains and fruit bowls, and fed it to my grandmother piece by piece while I slept on a vinyl mattress. Then who has been living in that house for 2 years? I asked. We both knew. Kyle's custom build wasn't taking a long time. Didn't exist. He was living in my inheritance. I called my mother that night from the shelter parking lot. I turned on my phone's voice recorder before I dialed. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I'd checked the laws a dozen times. Diane picked up on the 4th ring. Savannah, it's late. I saw Grandma today, Mom. Silence. Kind of silence that has weight. That's impossible, Diane said, her voice smooth but fast. She's in California. You shouldn't listen to her, Savannah. She has memory issues. You know that. She's not in California. She was here at the shelter. She showed me the deed to the house on Birchwood Lane. My name is on it, Mom. Why am I in a shelter while Kyle is in my house? I could hear her breathing change, faster, shallower. But when she spoke, she doubled down. Savannah, you need to calm down. You're stressed. You're not thinking clearly. I'm going to call your grandmother and straighten this out. Don't do anything rash. You know how the courts feel about unstable mothers. There it was. The weapon. Loaded and aimed. I'm thinking very clearly, Mom, I said. Good night. I hung up, stopped the recording, and added it to the records album. I stood in the parking lot for a long time. My breath made clouds in the cold air. She called me unstable. She'd called my grandmother confused. She had an answer for everything except the address on that deed. I walked back inside, checked on Maya, asleep with Captain tucked under her chin, and opened my journal. I wrote one line, she's not sorry. She's scared. For the first time since I'd checked in, I wasn't the one who was afraid. The next morning, Evelyn called and asked me to come to her house. Priya, my caseworker, offered to stay with Maya. I think Priya could see the fire in my eyes and knew I was finally fighting back. Evelyn's house was a modest, beautiful craftsman in Lake Oswego. Not flashy, but solid. She met me at the door with tea and a man sitting at her dining table. Savannah, Evelyn said, her voice like iron. This is Gerald Whitfield. He was your grandfather's attorney for 23 years. I called him last night. Gerald was 62, gay, bearded, and calm in the way that people who read contracts for a living tend to be calm. He moved with a deliberate, rhythmic grace, the kind of man who never rushed because he knew the law moved at its own pace. He shook my hand, a firm, dry grip, and opened a heavy leather folder on the table. "I ran a search on the Multnomah County Recorder's Office database this morning," he said, his voice a soothing baritone that masked the gravity of his words. "Your property at 1847 Birchwood Lane currently has a tenant. The lease was filed by Diane Mitchell, signing as..." He paused, turning a printed page toward me. "Authorized agent for S. Mitchell." I looked at the signature line. It said S. Mitchell in handwriting that was a haunting parody of my own. The loops were too tight. The capital S leaned too far to the right, like a person bracing for a fall. My stomach did a slow, nauseating roll. "She forged my signature," I whispered. "It appears so," Gerald said. He slid another page across the table, a spreadsheet he'd meticulously constructed from county and bank records. It was a cold, mathematical autopsy of my mother's betrayal. Monthly rent collected, $2,200. Duration, 24 months. I did the math in my head before he could say it, the numbers flashing like neon lights in a dark room. $52,800, Gerald said. Deposited into an account held jointly by Diane and Robert Mitchell. None of it transferred to you. None of it reported to the trust. Evelyn set her teacup down with a sharp clack. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. But her eyes, those sharp gray-blue eyes, went hard in a way I'd never seen. "My own daughter," she said quietly. "Stealing from a 6-year-old. I stared at that number, $52,800. That was the deposit for the apartment I'd lost. That was 2 years of stability I never had. That was clothes for Lily that weren't hand-me-downs with stains on the collars and holes in the knees. That was every night I'd lain awake on a thin vinyl mattress doing frantic math on the back of a grocery receipt, always coming up short. All of it had been sitting in Diane's account. Every single cent." Gerald closed the folder, but his expression remained grave. "There's more." I looked up, my pulse thrumming in my ears. "More. She also took out a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, on the property in your name." The room went very still. Gerald explained it the way you explain a wound, carefully but without pretending it didn't bleed. A home equity line of credit for $35,000 had been opened 14 months ago using forged documents. My name, my social security number, my supposed signature. The application listed my occupation as property manager, which I was not, and my address as 1847 Birchwood Lane, where I had never lived. "Where did the money go?" I asked, my voice sounding small and distant. Gerald turned to the next page. "Bank statements, not mine. Diane and Robert's joint checking account." He'd highlighted the withdrawals in a fluorescent yellow that seemed to burn the paper. $12,000 to a home renovation contractor. That would be Diane and Robert's kitchen remodel, he noted. I remembered the Facebook post from last summer, the granite countertops, the subway tile, the caption, "Finally got my dream kitchen." #blessed. $8,000 to Visa. Credit card debt. $5,000 to a Ford dealership, the down payment on Robert's F-150. And $10,000. He pointed to a single transfer dated June 14th to an account belonging to Kyle Mitchell. The same month Kyle posted the new Tahoe on Instagram. The same month Kyle texted me, "Sorry sis. We're tight right now." "That's $87,800 total," Gerald said. "Rent plus the HELOC draw, all taken from your property without your knowledge or consent." I gripped the edge of Evelyn's dining table. The wood was smooth and cool under my fingers, the only thing keeping me grounded. $87,800. While Lily drew pictures of houses she didn't have. While I ate canned soup at a folding table under flickering fluorescent lights. While my mother told me this was God's way of telling me to be more responsible. Gerald looked at me over his reading glasses. "This is fraud, Serena." forgery, theft by deception. We can go to the police. We can file a civil suit. Or we can do both. Evelyn reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her skin was like parchment, but her grip was steady. What do you want to do? I didn't answer immediately. I sat with the weight of it. The numbers, the forged signatures, Kyle's Tahoe, Diane's dream kitchen, Robert's truck, all of it built on the foundation of a house my grandmother had given me so my daughter would have a home. Then I said, I want my daughter to have her house. I want every dollar back. And I want them to know in front of everyone exactly what they did. Evelyn nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Gerald picked up his pen. I went back to the shelter that night and pulled the clear plastic folder out from under my mattress. It was already thick with the small indignities of the last few months. Now it needed to become a case. I bought a 3-ring binder from the dollar store, blue the only color they had, and a pack of tab dividers. I sat on my bunk after Lily fell asleep and built it section by section. Tab 1, the trust deed. Evelyn had given me a certified copy from Gerald's office. Embossed seal notarized. Every page initialed my name in bold black ink. Tab 2, property records. The Multnomah County Recorder search showing 1847 Birchwood Lane. The lien record. The Hellick filing. Tab 3, the forged lease. S. Mitchell in handwriting that wasn't mine, authorizing a rental agreement I'd never seen. Tab 4, screenshots. Diane's texts telling me to stop being dramatic. Kyle's text claiming they were tight. The Tahoe. The F-150. Tab 5, the phone recording. Diane's voice, smooth and steady, calling my grandmother confused and me unstable. Tab 6, my shelter journal. Every entry dated, timed, and detailed. Gerald added 2 more items the next day. The reverse image search results proving the curtain photo was a stock image, and an affidavit from Priya, my case manager, confirming our residence at the shelter and my status as a responsible parent. I held the binder in my lap. It was heavy. This wasn't revenge. Revenge was messy and loud. This was documentation. I was a teacher. I graded papers for a living. I knew how to organize evidence. Gerald drove me to Birchwood Lane on a Wednesday morning. I'd taken a personal day, telling the front office I had an appointment. The street was quiet and residential, lined with birch trees that were just beginning to show the faintest buds of green. The houses were older craftsman-style homes with covered porches and steep roofs. Number 1847 had a white picket fence and blue shutters. A porch light was still on, casting a pale yellow glow in the 10 a.m. sun. Gerald knocked. A young woman opened the door, holding a coffee mug. She looked surprised to find a silver-haired man in a suit on her porch. "Good morning. My name is Gerald Whitfield. I'm an attorney representing the legal owner of this property." She called her husband. They stood in the doorway, confused but polite. They'd been renting for 22 months, paying $2,200 a month to a woman named Diane, who told them it was her investment property. I stayed on the sidewalk. I couldn't bring myself to go inside, but I looked through the front window and saw a small room to the left. A bedroom. That room was the right size for a twin bed and a drawing table. In the backyard, visible through the fence, there was a tire swing hanging from an oak tree. Lily would have loved it. I turned away before I started to cry. Gerald was already on the phone. "The tenants are cooperating," he said as we walked back to the car. "There are victims here, too. We'll give them 60 days. We'll handle this by the book." By the book. I held on to those words like a railing on a dark staircase. Gerald laid out the plan at Evelyn's dining table the next afternoon. Notice to vacate, 60 days per Oregon statute trust amendment, revoking Diane's access and designating Gerald as successor trustee, fraud complaint, forgery, theft by deception, and identity theft civil suit, full recovery of $87,800. "Yes," I said. "All of that. But there's one more thing." Evelyn looked at me. "The party." Next Saturday was Diane and Robert's 35th wedding anniversary. The invitations had gone out weeks ago, gold lettering on heavy cardstock. The entire extended family would be there. 30 people who had spent years hearing Diane's version of me, the drama queen, the struggling daughter. I want every person in that room to hear the real story, I said. Because I'm tired of being asked why I never appreciate my parents. Gerald considered this. I can prepare a formal demand letter and notice of legal action. You could deliver it at the event. Hand-delivered, I said. To her face. Evelyn reached across and squeezed my hand. I'll make sure we're both invited. Before anything else, I had to remove the chain my mother had wrapped around my throat. Gerald filed a motion to terminate the supplemental guardianship on Monday morning. Without opposition, and with Priya's affidavit and my pay stubs, the judge reviewed the packet in chambers. I was grading spelling tests during my lunch break when the email came through. Order terminating supplemental guardianship. Sole legal and physical custody restored to Serena E. Mitchell. I put my head down on the table and cried silently. For over a year, I had walked on glass because she held that guardianship like a grenade. Not anymore. Saturday morning, the day of the party, I was awake since 4 a.m. I sat on the edge of my bunk and went through the blue binder one more time. Tab by tab. Court order? Check. Certified letter? Check. Trust deed? Check. Everything was in order. Priya stopped by at 7 a.m. She was off duty but had volunteered to take Lily to Evelyn's house for a sleepover. Lily would not be at that dinner. You okay? Priya asked. I'm terrified. Good. That means you care enough to do it right. I tried on my outfit in the communal bathroom, a white blouse, black slacks, and a blazer Priya had lent me. I looked at myself in the mirror. A woman in borrowed clothes standing in a shelter bathroom. Tomorrow, I told myself, I wouldn't hear the hum of these lights. I kissed Lily goodbye, her hair smelling like the coconut shampoo I refused to compromise on. I picked up my bag. My hands were shaking, but my head was clear. A text from my cousin Rachel came at 2 p.m. Heads up. Your mom's been telling everyone at church that you're struggling with mental health issues and she's been supporting you for months. People are eating it up. I wasn't surprised. It was the preemptive strike. Diane wanted everyone to think I was ungrateful before I even walked through the door. I texted Rachel back, Are you coming? Good. Keep your phone charged. I drove toward my parents' house with the blue binder and absolutely nothing left to lose. The house was lit up like a stage set. Through the bay window I could see aunts, uncles, and church friends. I stepped inside and the smell of catered lasagna and garlic bread hit me. 30 faces turned. I saw the pity from Aunt Mary and the discomfort from Uncle Tom. They had been briefed. They'd already chosen a side based on a lie. Diane came out of the kitchen in a cream blouse and pearls. When she saw me, her smile froze for exactly 1/2 second before reconfiguring into performance-grade warmth. Serena, honey. I'm so glad you came. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel No. 5. Behave yourself tonight, she whispered sharply in my ear. Don't you dare make a scene. I looked her in the eye. I wouldn't dream of it. The doorbell rang. It was Evelyn. Diane's face went white, the color of paper, the color of surrender. Mother! Surprise, Evelyn said. The room settled as Evelyn made her way through well-wishers. She eventually reached Diane and Robert. Then, with the tone of someone making pleasant conversation, she said, So, have any of you been to Serena's house on Birchwood Lane? The one I gave her. The room went quiet. Confused quiet. Diane crossed the room fast. Mom, let's not talk real estate right now. Evelyn took a sip of water. I just assumed everyone knew. I bought it for Serena and Lily 2 years ago. Serena, have you been enjoying it? Every pair of eyes in the room swiveled to me. I said nothing. The silence was doing my work for me. Diane opened her mouth, but I stood up before she could fill the space with another lie. "Since Grandma brought it up," I said, my voice steady, "I think everyone in this room deserves the truth. I have never been inside that house. I didn't know it existed until 1 week ago." The murmuring stopped. "I found out about the house because Grandma walked into the family shelter where Lily and I have been living for the past 2 months." Aunt Mary's hand went to her mouth. "The Maplewood family shelter," I continued. "Well, the house Grandma bought for us has been rented out by Mom for 2 years. Robert stood up. "That is enough, Serena." "Sit down, Dad." "I'm not done. Mom rented the house using a forged lease and my signature. She collected $52,000 in rent. She took out a $35,000 HELOC in my name. Total, $87,800. I said the number clearly. I wanted it in the air. I wanted every person in that room to feel the weight of it. All of it, deposited into Mom and Dad's joint account while my daughter drew pictures of houses she didn't have on the floor of a homeless shelter. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The anniversary banner hung behind Diane's head like a prop in a play that had gone terribly wrong. Diane's voice came out high and fractured. "That is a lie. Mother. Mother, tell them she's lying." Evelyn set down her water glass. "I wish she were." I reached into my bag. The room was so quiet I could hear the catered lasagna bubbling in its tray on the sideboard. Somewhere behind me, a phone buzzed once and stopped. Rachel, I'd learn later, was already texting her sister, "You need to call me right now." I pulled out the envelope, white and legalized. The red certified mail stamp across the front was bright under the overhead light. "This," I said, "is a formal demand letter prepared by Gerald Whitfield, attorney at law, on behalf of myself and the Hargrove Family Trust." I set it on the table between the lemon cake and a vase of grocery store tulips. "It contains a certified copy of the trust deed naming me as sole beneficiary of 1847 Birchwood Lane. Copy of the lease agreement you signed using a forgery of my signature. Bank records showing $52,800 in rent deposited into your checking account over 24 months. HELOC statement showing $35,000 drawn against my property using fraudulent documents." I ticked them off the way I read a rubric to my second graders. Calm, clear, no emotion wasted. And a notice that a fraud complaint has been filed with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. Diane stared at the envelope. She didn't touch it. Her hands were at her sides, fingers curled and trembling. Robert's mouth was open, but nothing was coming out. I reached into the bag one more time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "There's also this." I held it up. "A court order issued last Thursday terminating your supplemental guardianship of Lily. Effective immediately. Sole custody has been restored to me." That was the one that broke her. Not the money, not the fraud charges, the guardianship, the leash she'd held over me for a year. "You can't do this," Diane whispered. Her voice was stripped now, raw. "I am your mother." I looked at her. My mother in her cream blouse and pearls, standing in front of a banner celebrating 35 years of a marriage built in part on money stolen from her own granddaughter. "And I'm Lily's mother," I said. "That's the only title that matters to me right now." I set the court order on top of the envelope and stepped back. "You had 2 years to do the right thing. You had 2 years to hand me that key. Instead, you watched your granddaughter sleep in a shelter. So no, you don't get to call yourself my mother tonight." The room didn't gasp, just absorbed. 30 people standing in a living room decorated for celebration, absorbing the fact that the woman who baked the lemon cake had stolen a house from her own daughter. Diane cried. Not the quiet kind, not the kind you feel sorry for. The theatrical kind, the kind that turns outward, that reaches for an audience, that says, "Look what she's doing to me," without using those exact words. She pressed both hands to her chest and turned toward the room. You see? You see what she's doing on our anniversary? After everything I've done for her? I raised her. I sacrificed everything. She looked at Aunt Mary. Mary didn't move. She looked at Uncle Tom. Tom looked at the floor. Robert stepped in front of Diane like a shield. This family is falling apart because of you, Serena. You always had to make everything about yourself. I didn't respond to him. I turned to Rachel, who was standing near the bookshelf with her phone in her hand. Array, do you mind reading these out loud? I handed her my phone, open to the screenshot album. Rachel looked down, her eyes moving across the screen. Then she read clearly, steadily, the way someone reads testimony. Text from Diane Mitchell, January 24th, 9:47 p.m. Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times. The room flinched. Text from Diane Mitchell, February 1st, 11:12 a.m. The answer is no. And frankly, maybe this is God's way of telling you to be more responsible. Diane lunged forward. Those are out of context. Text from Kyle Mitchell, January 28th, 8:03 a.m. Sorry, sis. We're tight right now. Mom said you should apply for Section 8. Rachel lowered the phone and looked at her aunt. Were you tight, Aunt Diane? Because those Helic records say there was $35,000 sitting in your account when you told Serena you couldn't spare $2,000. Diane turned to Evelyn. Tears were real now, but they weren't the right kind. Not remorse, not shame, the tears of someone watching their story fall apart in real time. Mother, please. Can explain everything. It was a misunderstanding. Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. A misunderstanding does not come with a forged signature, Diane. The lemon cake sat untouched. Tulips leaned sideways in their vase. My mother stood in the middle of her own anniversary party, surrounded by 30 people who could no longer look her in the eye. Rachel didn't let it go. She turned to the corner where Kyle had been standing all evening. Kyle, did you know about this? Kyle's face was red. Not angry red, caught red. He shifted his weight. I didn't know the details. I just thought Mom was managing some property for Grandma. The Helic records, I said, show a $10,000 transfer to your personal account dated June 14th for the down payment on your Tahoe. The SUV. The hashtag blessed one. The one he posted on Instagram the same month he told me he was too tight to help with a deposit. Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. I thought that was Mom's money. She said it was a loan from her savings. It wasn't her money, Evelyn said from her chair. Her voice was even factual. It was drawn from a line of credit taken out fraudulently on your sister's property. A property I purchased so that your niece would have a home. The 6-year-old who has been sleeping in a shelter. Kyle put his beer down on the mantel. He didn't pick it up again. Uncle Tom spoke for the first time. His voice was thick. Diane, I vouched for you. I told people in this family that Serena was the problem. That she was ungrateful. That you were doing your best. He paused. You made me a liar. Aunt Mary whispered. I cannot believe this. You stole from your own grandchild. Diane's composure finally cracked. Not into sorrow, but defiance. It's not stealing, she shouted. It's family money. Mother gave it to me, and I managed it the way I saw fit. I gave it to Serena, Evelyn said. Quiet. Absolute. I have never in 78 years been more ashamed of my own child. The room held that sentence like a held breath. Diane looked at the 30 faces that had smiled at her when she cut the cake and found nothing. No sympathy. No rescue. She turned and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. Robert followed, the door shut. The anniversary banner hung crooked above the empty buffet table, one corner drooping where the tape had given up. Nobody fixed it. I left the party before anyone started cleaning up. I drove to Evelyn's house, picked up a sleeping Lily from the guest room, and buckled her in with Captain wedged between her and the seatbelt. She didn't wake up. On the drive back to the shelter, the last drive, I told myself, my phone buzzed. Gerald confirmed the letter had been hand-delivered with Rachel and Tom as witnesses. Priya texted a photo of a drawing Lily had made, a house with a yellow door and 3 stick figures out front. I saved both. The following week, Gerald did what Gerald does. He moved paper. Monday, civil suit filed. Claims: fraud, forgery, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty. Relief sought. Full restitution of $87,800 plus fees Tuesday. Fraud complaint formally received by the DA's office. Case number assigned: forgery in the first degree, a Class C felony. Wednesday, Gerald's office notified the bank. They froze the credit line and opened an internal investigation. Diane and Robert were now on the hook for the $35,000 balance Thursday. The tenants at Birchwood Lane, decent people caught in a lie, had already begun apartment hunting. No hard feelings, they'd gotten their deposit back from Gerald's office, funded by Evelyn as a gesture of good faith. Gerald called me Friday evening. Their attorney reached out today. Used the word untenable. That's lawyer for we're going to lose. I sat on my shelter bunk and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Traction. After 2 months of sinking, the ground was finally solid. Serena, Gerald said, you'll have your house by April. April. 2 months away. Lily's crayons. Lily's swing. Lily's room with the built-in shelves. I could do 2 months. Call came 2 weeks later. Diane used Kyle's number. Serena. Please, can we talk? Her voice was different, smaller. You have 2 minutes. Drop the charges, please. We'll pay you back. All of it. I swear your father's blood pressure is through the roof. The whole family won't speak to us. Pastor Reynolds asked us not to come to service. I'm begging you. I stood in the shelter hallway. Mom, you had 2 years. 730 days. Every single one of those days you could have called me and said, Serena, there's a house. It's yours. And every single one of those days you chose not to. I know. But you watched me beg you for $2,000 while you sat on $87,000. You told me God was teaching me responsibility. You used my daughter's guardianship to keep me quiet. Silence. So no, I said. I won't drop the charges. I'm your mother, Serena. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything to me, I said. That's why this hurts. But I have a daughter too, and she is never going to wonder whether her mother protected her. You didn't ruin this family, Mom. You just built it on a lie. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just turning on the lights. I hung up. I blocked Kyle's number. I walked to the common room. Lily was drawing with the pencils Evelyn had given her. What are we drawing today? I asked. Our new house, she said. With the swing. I picked up a green pencil and started on the tree. Sometimes I wonder if my mother ever really saw me. Not the version she described to relatives, but the woman who packed lunches at 5:30 a.m. and never asked for a thing she wasn't owed. Do people like her ever change, or do they just find someone new to control? I don't know. But I know what I chose. Tell me what you think. Drop it in the comments. For weeks after the party, they settled. Restitution, $52,800 repaid over 36 months, $1,467 per month. Hellick. Paid in full by Diane and Robert within 90 days. Kyle. $10,000 returned over 12 months. Criminal. Charges reduced to a misdemeanor contingent on full restitution and 3 years probation. No contact. Prohibited from contacting me or Lily. I looked through the windshield at my school building. Yes, I told Gerald. I accept. Robert sold the F-150. Diane was let go from her job. Conduct inconsistent with our values. Tenants moved out on March 29th. They left the tire swing. April 1st. Not a joke. Not a dream. I turned the silver key. The house smelled of quiet. Lily pushed past me and stopped. She saw the backyard through the sliding door. "Mom, there's a swing!" She ran. I let her. Priya arrived with our few boxes. Evelyn came next with daffodils and a kettle. Lily's room had the built-in shelves, just as I'd seen. We taped her drawing of the house above her bed. That night, for the first time in 74 days, I put my daughter to bed in her own room. No fluorescent hum. No stranger crying. Just rain on the roof and Lily's steady breathing. I lay down in my own bed and cried. But these weren't shelter tears. These were the tears of a woman who had finally stopped drowning. 6 months later, the birch trees turned gold. Lily started 2nd grade at Fernwood Elementary. Evelyn came every Saturday to draw. Sometimes I'd stand in the kitchen doorway with a cup of coffee and just breathe. I started seeing a therapist. I wanted to understand why I'd said, "Okay, Mom," for 29 years. That understanding came slowly, like spring. Diane and Robert sold their house and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. I didn't feel satisfied or sorry. I felt okay. Kyle sent a text, "I'm sorry. I should have known." I didn't reply. Maybe someday I would. One evening, Lily looked up from her drawing. "Mom, why didn't we always live here?" I thought about it. "Because sometimes it takes a while to find your way home, baby. But we're here now." She went back to her drawing, the house with 3 figures, a tall one, a small one, and a shorter one with white hair and a big smile. I smiled too. I used to think protecting my daughter meant keeping the peace. Swallowing the no. Now I know. Protecting her means making sure she never has to question whether she deserves a home. She does. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. Please subscribe if you haven't already and leave a comment. What would you have done at that party?